So I'll start with the Pacific. How big do you think the Pacific is? You know, it's hard to kind of comprehend it, right? You could take every piece of land on Earth and drop it into the Pacific Ocean. It's 170 million square kilometers. It's twice the size of the next largest ocean, which is the Indian Ocean. The Pacific is the mother of all oceans, which is how I titled that chapter. And we often think of it as Americans, typically, as sort of history began, I don't know, kind of around World War I, maybe Spanish-American War. We vaguely think about fighting in the Philippines with the Spanish. World War II is really our iconic vision of the Pacific in American history. As we roll back Japan and cross with MacArthur and Nimitz, that's a valid view. But big machines of war have sailed the Pacific for 4 or 5 centuries. And I'll just make one point of comparison for you. Everybody knows Christopher Columbus, right? Sailed the ocean blue in 1492, right? How big was his ship, the Santa Maria? 60 feet long. 60 feet long. It's a tiny ship. 100 years before that, the Chinese were operating ships under Admiral Zheng He. They operated ships that were 400 feet long. Same period of time. 4-deck ships, 500 mariners on them. He made voyages into the Indian Ocean, discovered the spice routes. This all occurs centuries before Europe begins to really understand the economic power. So this Pacific has an enormous history that we don't even think about. And if I can, let me just go back one step earlier to the Polynesians, who sailed 5,000 miles to populate these islands in Kon-Tiki-like boats the length of this room, 5,000-mile voyages. So the Pacific, first and foremost, it's its size. Secondly, it's its history. And thirdly, to pull us into the present, it is today a zone of deep competition, principally between the United States and China over the South China Sea, which the Chinese have claimed, taking historical arguments about how long they've operated in it. They claim the entire South China Sea. That's a huge flashpoint for us because it would push us out of the central beating heart of that ocean, which is the South China Sea, because 80% of all the commerce that moves in Asia goes through the South China Sea, because underneath it are billions of barrels of oil and trillions of square foot of natural gas. So China, United States, but of course Japan, historical maritime power since the emergence, since they come out of, in the mid-19th century, their self-imposed isolation. Our South Korean friends. There's a huge strategic set of muscle movements that are occurring today in the Pacific. And of course, the catalyst we're focused on today is the Korean Peninsula and Kim Jong-un, who I always say he's the most appropriately named leader in the world, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, because he's unpredictable, he's unstable, he's untested. That's a dangerous combination in a leader who has control of 15 to 20 nuclear weapons and is rapidly developing the ability to move them on intercontinental ballistic missiles. So the Pacific, huge, deep maritime history, current geopolitics, and let us not forget in the South, among our very closest allies in the world are Australians, New Zealanders. And we have many other strong relationships, including, by the way, Singapore, a small city-state that sits athwart arguably the most important strategic strait in the world, the Strait of Malacca. So that's the Pacific in 2 minutes.